After letting my neighbor borrow my ladder, I found it broken, left in the street. When I asked about it, he said, "You should have known better than to lend it to me." That night, I found nails scattered across my driveway. So I installed a camera, and what it caught. I've lived in the same neighborhood outside Joliet, Illinois, for 7 years. A quiet street, older houses, mostly families and retirees. I bought the house after my divorce. Just me and a garage I actually gave a damn about. I don't talk much to the neighbors. Nothing personal. I'm just the kind of guy who keeps to himself. But I'm not rude. If someone waves, I wave back. If someone needs a tool, I'll lend it. That's how this started. Brian moved in 2 years ago, directly across from me. Early 30s, always wearing camo hats and cheap sunglasses, like he thought he was on a job site even when he wasn't working. Said he was a contractor, but I never saw him leave the house before noon. Always blasting music from the garage, throwing beer cans in the recycling like trophies. We never really talked, but one Saturday morning, he crossed the street while I was washing my truck and said, "Hey man, mind if I borrow your ladder?" I hesitated. It was a good ladder, aluminum, solid, clean. Not one of those bent-up ones people leave in the rain. I said, "Sure. You need it for long?" He goes, "Just to fix a shingle. I'll have it back in an hour." I figured, okay. We live across the street. What's the worst that can happen? Big mistake. 3 days go by. No ladder. I walk over, thinking maybe he forgot. I knock, no answer. Finally, on day 4, I see it. Not leaning nicely by the fence. No. It's out by the street, like trash. One of the legs is bent like it got run over. Scratches all along the sides. Covered in what looked like dried roofing tar. I drag it back across the street and knock on his door. This time, he answers. "Hey," I hold it up. "What happened to this?" He looks at it, looks at me, then shrugs. "You should have known better than to lend it to me." Then he closes the door. "No joke." That's what he said. Not even pretending to care. Just that smug little smirk. I stood there for a minute, staring at the door like maybe I'd imagined it. But no, I didn't. That's exactly what he said. I went back to my garage, set the ladder against the wall. Tried to let it go. Figured it was a loss. But later that night, I went out to grab a delivery off my porch. I was barefoot. Stepped right onto a nail. It stabbed through the skin near my heel. I winced, nearly dropped the package. Limped back inside, pulled the nail out. My foot was bleeding. I went back out, turned on the porch light. That's when I saw them. Nails. Dozens of them. All across the driveway. Some on the sidewalk. A few close to my tires. Big ones, too. Rusty, heavy. The kind you can't miss if you're looking. But just right to ruin your night if you're not. I spent the next hour crawling around with a flashlight and a magnet wand, picking them up. My foot throbbed the whole time. I didn't sleep much. The next day, I installed a camera. Nothing fancy, just a motion cam I could check for my phone. I pointed it right at the driveway and sidewalk. Set it to notify me if anything moved between midnight and 5 a.m. The first night was quiet. The second night, it caught him. 2:14 a.m. Brian. Wearing a hoodie, jeans, and gloves. Holding a red plastic cup. He walked up the edge of my yard, crouched, and started flicking nails one at a time into my gravel. He moved slow, like he'd done it before. Then he walked back across the street, completely calm, like nothing happened. I sat on my couch, phone in my hand, just staring at the footage. My foot still wrapped in gauze from the night before. He knew what he was doing. That wasn't some drunken prank. That was intentional. That was a message. So I sent one back. The next day, I didn't say a word to him. Didn't even look his way. Instead, I made copies of the footage. Saved it to a USB, uploaded a backup to the cloud, even emailed it to myself, just in case. I wanted proof in as many places as possible. Then I started thinking about what I could do. I wasn't going to call the cops over nails. Not yet. I knew how that would go. They'd take a report, maybe knock on his door, and that'd just make him worse. Brian seemed like the kind of guy who'd enjoy the attention. So I waited. For a week, I said nothing. But I watched. He had a routine, late nights, weird guests, random trips to the hardware store, always coming back with tools and lumber, but never actually building anything. Then one afternoon, I saw him leave with Cassie. They pulled out in his truck, hauling something big in the bed. Looked like plywood. That was my chance. I crossed the street, walked into his yard like I belonged there. Checked his side gate. Unlocked. I stepped into his backyard. Total mess. Old tires, beer cans, half-burned logs, and a fire pit. And there it was, my ladder. He'd tried to fix the bent leg by duct taping a 2x4 to it. Idiotic. But it wasn't the ladder that caught my attention, it was the shed behind the fence. Padlocked. New looking. Same color paint as the house. That night, I checked my camera footage again. I'd adjusted the angle to catch more of the street. Around midnight, I saw him roll a cart from his garage to the shed, dragging something large and covered in a tarp. He looked over his shoulder twice. I don't know what he was hiding, but something about it didn't sit right. So, I made a plan. That weekend, he left again, this time alone. Took his truck out around 9 p.m. I waited 15 minutes, walked across the street, and tried the side gate again. Still unlocked. I walked straight to the shed. The padlock was thick, but I had bolt cutters. I snapped it off in seconds. Inside were stacks of unopened boxes. Power tools, all with price tags still on them. Some of them from brands I knew the local hardware store carried, some from stores miles away. And, behind the shelves, I found bags of copper wire.
New. Clean.
He was stealing materials. No doubt in my mind. I didn't take anything. Just took photos. Every shelf, every label, every bag. Then I locked the shed again, but this time, I switched the padlock. Used one of mine. That's when things got worse. 3 days later, I woke up to a loud bang at 3 a.m. My trash cans knocked over. Again, nails everywhere. But this time, he didn't even try to be subtle. He dumped them across my porch steps, my driveway, and the street. And this time, he left a message. Spray painted across my garage door. Mind your business. I stood there in the dark, heart pounding, holding a flashlight in one hand and a broom in the other. That was it. No more waiting. I printed the photos, burned the camera footage to a second USB, and took everything to the police. I didn't expect much, but I figured if he wanted to play games, I'd start flipping over the board. The officer at the station looked skeptical at first. Joliet PD doesn't exactly drop everything for neighbor disputes. But when I handed over the photos from inside the shed, and then showed him the video of Brian spreading nails across my driveway in the middle of the night, his tone changed. He asked, "You go inside his shed yourself?" "I didn't break anything," I said. The lock was open. Not completely true, but not a lie I felt bad about either. He nodded, said he'd file a report, told me not to engage with Brian, said they'd look into it. I wasn't holding my breath. 2 days later, I saw the squad car parked in front of Brian's house. I watched from my living room window as 2 officers talked to him on the porch. He looked annoyed. Hands up, pacing, laughing like it was all some misunderstanding. Then they walked to the backyard. I saw them gesture toward the shed. Brian followed them, and they disappeared around the fence. They didn't arrest him, but they were there for almost 45 minutes. When they left, Brian was standing in the yard, just staring at my house. Later that night, around 2 a.m., my phone pinged again. Motion detected. This time, he wasn't alone. The footage showed Brian and another guy. Tall, wearing a hoodie with the hood up, walking down my side yard. They stayed just out of range of the front porch light, but my camera caught them clearly. Brian had a crowbar. The other guy carried what looked like a gas can. They stopped by my garage window. And then they backed off. I watched as they stood there, whispering. Something spooked them. Maybe they saw the other camera I'd installed above the side gate. Either way, they turned around and left without doing anything. But that was it. That was the line. I sent the new footage straight to the detective who'd taken my report. The next morning, I was on the phone with my insurance, documenting everything: foot injury, property damage, threats. I started the process of filing for a restraining order. I told the officer, "He's escalating. You need to stop him before this gets worse." But it was already worse. That evening, I came home from work and found my garage door open. Not just unlocked. Open wide, like someone had forced it up. Inside, every drawer had been pulled out. Toolboxes dumped. My shelves emptied. My table saw gone. Power drill gone. Even the damn extension cords gone. They'd cleaned me out. I knew it was Brian. No question. He was the only one who knew what I kept in there. And I had just enough doubt in the footage, just enough gray area, that I knew he could still play dumb. So I made one more move. I drove an hour out of town to a pawn shop I knew about in Crest Hill. Not a big place, but shady enough that people looking to unload stuff fast sometimes used it. I walked in, showed the clerk a photo of my saw, custom red casing, initials etched under the handle. He looked at it, then looked at the saw sitting behind the counter. "That's it," I said. "That's mine." He shrugged. "Guy sold it 2 days ago." Said he was clearing out after a renovation job. Asked if he had a receipt.
He did.
The name on it? Brian S. Layton. That's when I knew I had everything I needed. I didn't call the cops right away.
Not yet.
Instead, I bought my saw back. Full price.
No haggling.
I wanted it in hand. Then I took the receipt, the video footage, the shed photos, and walked into the police station again. This time I didn't ask for the desk officer. I asked for the detective who'd handled the last report. He sat me down in a side room, looked through everything quietly. When he got to the pawn shop receipt with Brian's name on it, he said, "Now we've got something." I left the station feeling like maybe, finally, the guy was going to get what was coming to him. I didn't hear anything for 3 days. Then, on the 4th night, I woke up at 4 a.m. to flashing lights in my front window. Squad cars. 3 of them. Across the street, they had Brian in cuffs. His face was red, shouting something about being framed. Cassie was on the porch in a hoodie, arms crossed, not saying a word. Turns out he had a prior arrest in Iowa. Burglary. Years back. That's why he panicked when the cops showed up this time. He knew he was out of second chances. They charged him with theft, property damage, harassment, and trespassing. Plus some other charges I didn't even know about. Apparently someone else down the street had reported missing tools a month earlier. My case just gave them the opening they needed. But here's the twist I didn't see coming. A week later, Cassie knocked on my door. I opened it expecting some screaming, maybe a threat. But she just stood there, quiet. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept in days. "I'm not here to fight," she said. I didn't know he was doing all that. Not like that. I didn't say anything. I just waited. She handed me a small cardboard box. Inside were some of my missing tools. 2 screwdrivers, a socket set, and a key to my shed I didn't even realize had been taken. "I found this stuff in his closet," she said. "He kept it hidden in a locked drawer. I thought you should have it back." Then she looked up at me and added, "He said you ruined his life. But he ruined it long before this." She walked away after that. I stood there with that box in my hands, realizing something. Brian wasn't just a petty thief or a loud neighbor. He was dangerous. And I'd let him into my life thinking he was just another guy on the block. Sometimes I still look out my window at his empty house, the grass growing wild, the blinds all shut. And I think about how a broken ladder turned into all of this. I used to feel angry. Now, mostly, I just feel stupid for not trusting that first instinct that told me, don't hand your things to someone who doesn't look you in the eye. After Cassie dropped off the box, I didn't see her again. Her car disappeared from the driveway a few days later. Someone said she moved back in with her sister in Naperville. I didn't ask around. I didn't need to. It was over for her, and she knew it. But Brian? He wasn't done. A month passed. Then one day I got a letter from his lawyer. He was claiming I'd trespassed, that I'd broken into his shed, tampered with his property, caused undue emotional harm. He was filing a civil suit. I sat at my kitchen table holding the envelope, trying not to laugh. It wasn't funny, but it was so typical. After everything, he was still trying to turn it back on me. I called the detective. He said, "Don't worry. It's noise. It'll get tossed." But it didn't get tossed. The paperwork came through. Court date, local hearing. I had to miss work, sit in a courtroom, and listen to Brian's public defender say I'd violated his right to privacy by entering his shed without permission. He sat there with that same smirk, like he was the victim now. Like I was the one who crossed a line. When it was my turn, I gave them everything: photos, timestamps, receipts, the police reports, and the video footage. The judge barely let the other side speak after that. Case dismissed. But something shifted in me. Because for those 3 weeks, while I waited for the hearing, I started second-guessing myself. I started checking my cameras every morning, even when nothing happened. I stopped leaving my tools out, stopped opening my blinds at night. I changed the locks.
Twice.
It wasn't about the ladder anymore. It wasn't even about the nails. It was about how fast something can go from small to dangerous, and how no one sees it until it's already too late. And the worst part? Even after they dismissed his case, even after the police confirmed they were pressing charges, I still kept waiting for the next thing. I still checked my porch every morning. 2 weeks after the court case was dismissed, I got a call from a block number. I usually don't answer those, but something told me to pick up. It was Brian. Jailhouse phone system. That delay in the line, the automated message saying the call was being recorded. He didn't say hello, didn't ask how I was. He just said, "You think this is over?" I didn't say anything. I just waited. "I've got friends," he said. "People who don't care about cameras. You like sleeping so close to the window?" Then the line went dead. I sat there for a long time, phone still in my hand, the dial tone humming in my ear. I called the police again, reported the threat. They said they'd add it to the file. But unless something happens, the officer told me, there's not much we can do. That night, I moved a cot into my garage and slept there with the lights on. I installed a third camera, hidden this time. I bought motion lights, reinforced the shed lock. I even installed a fake security sign on the front lawn. But it didn't stop the feeling. A week later, my truck tires were slashed. All 4. No nails this time. Just 4 clean cuts, deep and deliberate. Not random. Not a prank. There were no prints.
No footy.
Whoever did it knew how to avoid the cameras. I knew it wasn't random. And I knew it wasn't over. After the tires, I stopped parking in the driveway. I started leaving my truck at a friend's place across town and took a rideshare to work. It was inconvenient, but at least I could sleep without checking the window every 10 minutes. I told a few coworkers what was going on. One of them offered to let me borrow their car until I could replace the tires. I said no. I didn't want anyone else getting pulled into this. Then one night, just after midnight, my back motion light went off. I checked the monitor, nothing. 10 minutes later, it went off again. Still nothing. I stepped out onto the porch with a flashlight and just stood there, watching. No movement, no sound. I scanned the fence line, the garage, the corners of the house. And that's when I saw it. A single nail, laid perfectly in the center of my porch mat. Not scattered. Not tossed.
Placed.
Like a signature. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I drove to the courthouse and filed for a permanent restraining order. I brought copies of the tire report, the porch photo, the phone call log. The clerk barely looked at me, just handed me a form. And that's when it hit me, nobody really cares until someone gets hurt. It didn't matter that I had video, or photos, or injuries. As long as Brian wasn't physically standing on my porch with a weapon, the system would move at its own pace. And he knew that.
He was counting on it.
I started keeping a bat by the door. Bought a small safe for my important papers. Left a light on in every room. Neighbors started to notice. One asked if everything was okay. I smiled and said, "Yeah, just being careful." But inside, I was waiting for the next move I couldn't see coming. I used to think the worst part was the broken ladder. Then the nails. Then the threats. But it's not any of that. It's knowing I still flinch when I hear something outside at night. It's knowing one man's bitterness carved out a space in my life I can't seem to fill back in. And the truth is, some damage doesn't look like damage until you realize you've been living around it for months.